Peso Pluma, among other artists in the regional Mexican space, are blowing up the Hot 100, Billboard's Hot 100. We're going to talk about that. Plus, so much more with the strike talks going on with the WGA and AMPTP, and so much more. Also, the death of Jerry Springer, all here on the Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for listening in. King of Podcasts here with you. Welcome you to the program, episode number 275. Thanks for being here. And with that said, I'm doing the simple production to get into the show. Well, there we go. We're just going to do it like that. This is like how I used to do it in the radio studio, right? Pot it up, fade it down, done. Here we go. King of Podcast, broadcasterspodcast.com. It's all set up. So that is the story. 15 regional Mexican songs right now, currently on the Billboard Hot 100. It's a big feat. And just to look at let me just go through those 15 songs right now as we speak. So starting off the top, you get in to the Hot 100. If I got to go all the way down, let's see. We start off with Di Que Si, Grupo Marca Registrada, and Grupo Frontera. Then you move along. There's a lot of Spanish on the chart, by the way. Peso Pluma, along with Fuerza Regida with Igualito a Mi Apa at number 90. By the way, that other song, Di Que Si, was number 99. Never seen this before. Becky G and Peso Pluma with Chanel at 88. These are a couple of songs I actually have in my playlist. Mega Miami, if you want to look for it, it's at kingofpodcasts.com on Spotify. Que Vuelvas, Karin Leon, and Grupo Frontera. That is what? Number 82. Then you move along. El Gordo Traer el Mando, Chino Pacas at 75. This is crazy. Chi y la Pizza Fuerza Regida y Nathaniel Cano at number 69. Moving along, this is all on the current list of the Billboard Hot 100 for the week ending April 30th, just to give you the heads up. And we're still going along. Junior H and Peso Pluma with El Azul at number 59. Bebe Dame, Fuerza Regida y Grupo Frontera. Boy, I can't say it late at night. And that's at number 52. You move along here, and then we get to, where is it at? Oh, Gabito, Ballesteros, Peso Pluma, and Nathaniel Cano with AMG at number 40. Imagine if Ryan Seacrest actually was counting the proper top 40. He would be playing this song right now. Peso Pluma and Nathaniel Cano at number 35 with PRC. This is crazy. Por las noches, Peso Pluma on a solo shot at number 32. And then we move along here, and we're getting to the top 20. And now we're some serious points. Un Exciento, Grupo Frontera, and Bad Bunny at number 15 in a debut. La Bebé, Young Lucas, and Peso Pluma at number 12. And into the top 5, number 5 this week, Ella Baila Sola, Eslabón Armado, and Peso Pluma. Number 5, 15 songs. Now, last year, and even the year before, I would listen to some of the Dominican Republic stations when they would be playing dembow. Because in Dominican Republic, they're not afraid of playing other songs that might be outside of the gamut. That might be Spanish. And what I was noticing was on those dembow radio stations, reggaeton is very simple. But for dance music, it's the same kind of thought process as with American music in the Billboard Hot 100, why country would be so popular. By the way, country is actually quite popular right now with crossovers. With Morgan Wallen dominating the chart right now. He has the song Last Night, which was a former number 1 song, currently number 2. Among other things. And you look at the charts here and you say to yourself, the American public doesn't understand why the regional Mexican sound is finally making its way to the mainstream now after all these years. Plus, when I heard about the Dominican Republic stations over there playing it, they were playing certain songs that were like the full-fledged, like we're talking about banda, which is a very particular type of regional Mexican. Banda, cumbia, and ranchera, but the ranchera is much more traditional. Ranchera is like more like a traditional classic country kind of feel to it. Banda is like the extra like bumpy, bounce around, lion dancing, go around the circle floor. And the same way here. But it's a fascinating thing. And cumbia is very much like a kind of a Colombian feel, but Mexican, also Mexican, South American, if you want to will, even Nicaragua, Central American, South American, definitely a feel like that. And you look at these songs and they're like, they have been designed to be a much more pliable. They're not super, like they get the feel that mariachi feel to it with the trumpets and with the horns going pretty like going off on it, right? I think of Mark over on Billboard Breakdown calling them farty trumpets or farty horns, which is funny. It's that whole bum, 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 like it's that kind of deal. The accordions, you hear that going on. That's like it's like the pedal guitar and the steel. Yeah, the pedal guitar and, you know, like hearing like a banjo into the mix. You're just kind of off. And it's interesting. It's fascinating. Listen, I get why the Mexican audience is so embraced to regional Mexican. I get it. I really do. And there's sometimes where songs like, I mean, I could try to listen to a little bit of a regional Mexican station, which you don't hear a lot of those stations around here, by the way. I mean, down where I'm at, yes. Texas, California, Florida, to some extent. We have our stations, okay? We have La Ley, Que Buena. Well, Que Buena is actually more in L.A. and Las Vegas. Then you have, you know, Lo Que Manda and all this kind of stuff. Like they have all these stations that have their certain kind of things to it, right? But for some reason, the crowd is kind of taken into regional Mexican. And it's a fascinating sound. I enjoy it. Like I like this kind of change up in the charts. And it's basically all streaming that's causing it. Basically all streaming. But also this is the weakness of the Billboard Hot 100 because a lot of pop songs are not making it on the chart because there's not that many pop songs out there. And everything else kind of gets played down. Like if you look at that top 10 right now, you have quite a few songs that are definitely radio standards. And along with these radio standards, you have a lot of throwbacks being thrown to all these contemporary hit radio stations because they know there's not enough pop music to go ahead and just replay over and over. So they're just playing back an old bunch of stuff. They're going back to the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. They're not afraid of doing it either. I get that part. If you want to basically turn into like a soccer mom station, be more like a hot AC than you are a top 40. That's what some of these stations are doing. I can't blame them for that. But it doesn't mean I have to like it either. Because I don't. But now we're at the point where the Hot 100 is going to be susceptible to a definite push of regional Mexican. So we're going to talk about this plight right here, this big push going on, which has been amazing. LA Times puts a very good story to explain it all. So let's take it from there first, shall we? So Eslabón Armado and Peso Pluma made Latin music history when their ballad Ella Baila Sola, She Dances Alone, went to number 5 in the Billboard Hot 100, the first regional Mexican song to reach the top 10. The first one to hit number 1 on Billboard's Global 200, which means across the world. It's on the top 50 USA streaming chart on Spotify right now, currently. And Ella Baila Sola is just one of many regional songs that are getting popular on TikTok. And young Mexicans and descendants of Mexicans are coalescing around the sounds of their heritage. And, you know, I mean, why not? Listen, I'm going to play a little bit of this for you. And just a bit, because I know I can't put that much on the air, but I'm going to just play a little bit for you, just so you get a taste of it. Check this out. Skip a little bit. You can definitely hear the horns, but they're not too prominent. Kind of a 30s, 40s ballroom type of feel to it. All kind of dressed up. I like that. It's definitely got a different piece to it, you know? So originating in Patterson, California, the four-piece group Eslabon Armado have popularized the yearning acoustic romanticism of música sierreña, or the folky mountain music of their parents' and grandparents' generations, which is powered by a requinto guitar. And they had a couple of songs that were popular in 2020 with Con tus besos and Jugaste y Sufrí. And one of the songs actually made the Hot 100 was the first placement on the mainstream American chart. And all of 5 Eslabon Armado albums have been on the regional Mexican chart, have all topped the regional Mexican chart of Billboard. The video is pretty cool, I must say that. And the way they're playing everything out there, it's quite interesting. I can't knock what they've done here to become popular. You gotta really do get into it, because the singing is not necessarily like, you're not getting Whitney Houston or The Weeknd here, okay? You're not getting, you're just getting something that's a different sound to it. But it's got a cool feel to it. That's the best part. And Peso Pluma has enjoyed an unusually rapid ascent in the last month. He's born Hassan Emilio Cabande Laija, was born in Jalisco, Mexico. He's a 23-year-old, and he got his following circulating his gangster-fied corridos on platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify. And he has overtaken Bad Bunny as the most streamed artist in Mexico. And the mainstream of these two artists couldn't have happened without existing Mexican stars that have been on the Latin charts for years. And some of those have included Rancho Humilde and alum and Corridos Tumbados pioneer Nathaniel Cano, who's been doing a lot of stuff with other featured artists as well. And they have back-to-back singles, AMG and PRC. And those songs, along with Pluma's past releases, Por las Noches y La Bebe with Young Lucas, all joined Ella Baila Sola in the Hot 100 the week of April 11th, so 2 weeks ago. And now we're here, and Becky G has collaborated with Pluma on the song Chanel, and welcomed the singer onto Coachella's main stage during the Weekend 1 festivities. By the way, you always remember one thing about Coachella. We talked about this last year. Remember when UK rap became prominent? And I talked about it on that episode during this time last year, with Dave coming out on stage, I think with Ed Sheeran accompanying him on stage, right? Or inviting Dave on stage and getting out to do a set. Same thing here. Bad Bunny also invited Mexican band Grupo Frontera to crash this Coachella and perform 3 songs, including the new single Exemplified. Right? And Pluma has also established his own boutique label called Double P. And he has his first U.S. tour, which will start at the YouTube Theater in Inglewood, California on July 20th. And he's also going to be on the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. This is where we are. This is where we are. Peso Pluma has become the star, is the front runner of the regional Mexican movement right now. This is great. And for those that want to not realize, you want to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion? Listen, the Mexican community getting behind these stars making it to the mainstream. By the way, this is what we call crossover. Right? Crossover. This is why I talk about these things, and it's very important. And by the way, if you didn't know, there's a lot of artists that have actually done the same thing. So there was a story that came out from Billboard that talked about putting out a vote for the favorite Mexican urban collab. So the artists that work together, combining forces to create crossover Latin singles. Peso Pluma and Blessed's Las Borras, Bad Bunny and Nathaniel Cano's Soy el Diablo were all on this list. And so they got together in 2019 and did a remix to Cano's Soy el Diablo. And now Bad Bunny's with Grupo Frontera and doing the song right now. Peso Pluma, he is collaborating with non-Mexican artists, Nicky Nicole, Alvi on the drums, who is like a really popular, super popular reggaeton producer right now. He's on like a lot of records for like Karol G, and I'm trying to think like Ozuna, and there's a lot. And Nicky Jam and Luis Arconriquez did a song called Como el Viento, a melodious corrido with hints of trap. And Then you move along, and there's Grupo Firme and Maluma's Cada Quien, Ivan Cornejo, and Jaiko's Esta Dañada, a remix of Ivan Cornejo's song, who actually made it on the chart before, and then a remix. Banda MS did a song with Snoop Dogg last year, and Becky G got on it, a song called Que Maldición. These are the songs that are coming up here, and it's incredible. And listen, I'm getting myself into it and just kind of enjoying it. Like, I'm just getting into the mix, and it's not that bad when I think about it. But this is becoming much more prominent. Now, the song that they just talking about, ep.275, I want to take a little bit of that. It's a norteño-tinged cumbia. Now, norteño is also for the northern Mexico, and it's also just a different feel to it as well. I'll play a little bit of that, too, for you, just to give you, like, a taste of it. And when I see all this, I'm fascinated. This is mainstream being crossed over, but of course the corporates are not going to take well to this. Now, will reggaeton stations, will they play these songs? The Caribbean style stations? Probably not. Here's a Bad Bunny Grupo, Frontera. It's something that's different. I can appreciate it. And that's where we're at right now. So you have these songs in here, and it's different. And, you know, it's, I don't know. I can say that when you hear these songs right now, it's like, it's a fresh sound. It's something that maybe, you know, we've had things where like songs will get something, people into a country feel. And the same thing here. And look, I can't knock the likes of Bad Bunny, Becky G, and Nicky Jam, and others jumping on the bandwagon. Because to get it, when their music might be taking a little bit of a break, there might be a little bit of a lull in reggaeton right now, to combine forces here is a smart move. And for regional Mexican to get a little bit of an inroad in here and let artists like Peso Pluma come in, why not? This is where I talked about with Dembo last year, where I thought there's a move for that. And there is still a bit. Like, you see certain artists that are still combining forces. Like, I just heard Coi Leray. She's done a couple of remixes to keep her song Players up there, where she did a remix with David Guetta. And Takesha, who's the female artist that attached herself with a song called Perra with Bad Bunny last year. But she's been doing quite a few things anyway on her own to work with artists. And what she did was, she worked along with Coi Leray to do a remix of Players. Pretty good stuff. Which I didn't even know that Takesha actually spoke fluent English or could rap in English, which is kind of nice. So we're going to see more of Takesha at some point. Keep an eye on that name. You're going to see her out there. You won't forget her. Very unrecognizable artist. Very recognizable, excuse me. You can't miss. Now, with that said, we see all these artists here, and it's part of a bigger thing as well, where in Billboard, even Billboard also, they like to go and talk a lot about the Spanish side of music. And they even talk about the point where that women are getting much more prominent in music as well. But it has been that way. But they think there's much more to that right now. I don't know if that's so much that. But there was another story that came out about women breaking barriers in Latin music. An all Spanish language album by a woman topped the Billboard top 200. But they talk about how there's not enough proportional representation on the charts. So Karol G has a new album Mañana Será Bonito, it hit number 1 of the all-genre Billboard 200 chart on the week ending March 5th. And only 2 other albums ever led the list, and that was Bad Bunny's with Un Verano Sin Ti in 2022 and El Último Tour del Mundo in 2020. Now, 2 of the top 5 albums in 2021 were women, and that was Karol G's KG0516, and the other one was Selena's Ones, a chart mainstay, which, was Selena, the artist that was a prominent in the 90s, was an incredible singer. And much like an Aaliyah, as a very good example, she was the daughter of Mexico when it comes to music. Tragically taken so early in her life. We know her. She's been given tributes over and over. The movie with Jennifer Lopez starred in, which helped jumpstart her career. All of that. And so right now, men outpacing women in the story, they say, reflects what we've seen in the 90s when the chart was launched. In the 2000s, 23 albums by women peaked at number 1, 123 for men. 2017, 19 women-led projects compared with 150 by men ruled the chart. And in the 2020s, men have placed 16 number 1s on the chart, 8 by women. Currently, right now, the one that had hit really high up on the chart was Shakira and Bizarrap's head-turning Bizarrap Music Sessions Volume 53, first Spanish-language song by a woman to debut in the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100. Then we had another song which made the number 7, which was TQG by Shakira and Karol G. Good songs both, by the way. Now, there are some people in the music industry that ask, why is it so hard to see where women don't make it that much farther? It is harder. But it's not as if there isn't women being represented on the Latin charts. No, there is. But in the reggaeton side, it's much more of a men's environment that's going on right there. And that's what it is. But it's been like that for a long time. Let me tell you, man, when I programmed Hola 104.9, Hola 104.9, right? The Spanish station that I did was reggaeton based. And let me tell you, when I tried to go ahead and find enough to diversify the playlist, because I was like, there's too many men in the playlist. I mean, it's fine. There's a lot of good salsa songs, a lot of good merengue, bachata, reggaeton. But I needed more females in there. So to find a lot more Karol G, to find a lot more of, I had to look a little bit more. And it was not easy to find enough artists out there to really put out. Like Shakira had only so many songs that would hit in the Spanish chart. But being prominent, she did a lot more for her English side of her career. When I think of salsa, I think of La India. I think of Celia Cruz. But it was always where it was kind of tough to get and put that out there. Now, what's interesting in the Dembow side, which isn't reported on this article, the Dembow actually has quite a few women right now that are prominent in that scene as well. You got Tokisha, you got Men Are Queen, you got La Perversa, and the Dembow songs are getting much more prominent with more females in it, which is a good thing. I like the mix-up of that. That's actually much better. So that's a good part of all this. But there are some artists that are in here that, you don't hear a lot of. Maria Becerra, Tini. I'm just trying to think of what are the names that are out there, but it's not that many I can think of at the moment. But they've had a lot that have been out there that have been very prominent. Rosalia is also on that list, among others. But it's few and far between. I'm not denying that at all. But the ones that have been able to make themselves very prominent into the list, there's quite a few. Don't get me wrong. There's quite a few of them right now. And it's much appreciated. And so seeing this much music now in this kind of level in mainstream music gives me hope, gives me promise. We need that more and more. And we go back and look, and there's another story that came out talking about the same thing, where their popularity explosion. Now, corridos is the real issue of the songs. That's what's gotten very popular, is that part. They're Mexican narrative songs. They're ballads that often recount a heroic struggle. And some of the artists they have here, by the way, Peso Pluma in English is the same thing as featherweight. So these artists have been making it up there with corridos tumbados, or the already established corridos bélicos. Corridos tumbados, which translates to knocked or lied down, has a mix of electronic beats, reggaeton, and hip-hop. Corridos bélicos is more warlike, and its lyrics are mainly focused on drug trafficking and the ongoing cartel turf battles in Mexico. But they also fall into the controversial narcocorrido, which is drug ballads. And the lyrics for, like I say, song El Belicón, from Peso Pluma and Raúl Vega from 2022, their lyrics would include this, and if you translate, I'm the one in charge here, sports cars in my collection, mini-me's, bazookas, and Kalashnikovs, all my boys are ready, they like action. Now, so there's been some controversy to these records. And then some government officials in Mexico have moved to ban narcocorridos music from public spaces because of explicit lyrics, but it was later overturned by their Supreme Court as a violation of freedom of expression. And the government wanted to ban the genre on radio stations, record companies, and artistic promoters to not give concerts by groups who advocated violence, because indeed the narco ballads were normally legitimizing criminal groups and criminal activities. So yeah, they're basically going for like the, the cartels. Now it's interesting that there might be a message behind the music, which people may not realize, but here's what we got. A communications professor at USC Annenberg studies narcoculture in Mexico and the U.S. He told the Courier Journal that there are two types of these audiences behind the explosion, one on each side of the border. And he says, quote, I think they have reasons for approaching the narcocorridos. It seems to me that many people in Mexico do it as a way of understanding the violence that surrounds them, as a way of processing it. And young Latinos in the U.S. gravitate toward the music because it helps them process the systems of power around them. He says, now, quote, here in the U.S., we suffer little from social power, and the narcocorridos help us momentarily to feel powerful, somewhat similar to the way gangster rap in the U.S. has been used by African-American youth. It's a genre that lights up the lives of many young people, and what they get from the narcocorridos is a sense of life, a sense of freedom, and having fun. So this music's now going global. And Abelardo Rivero Levy, a Warner Music Mexico producer, says we are excited the whole world is listening to Mexican music and raises the Mexican flag. The music that really transcends is the one that really connects with the feeling of a generation. And now they're part of the narco marketing evolution. The singer's specialty has always been social media. And YouTube has lost power. They're now on TikTok, which is excellent for marketing, according to an anthropologist who studies narcoculture marketing, Alejandra León Olivera. And it helps them to promote this cultural consumption to reach other latitudes so they become fashionable. And this culture in those music, the TV shows, and movies often show the only prosperous part of that lifestyle. Now, corridos, to give you a little bit of background, they go back to the Mexican War of Independence in the early 1800s. Told romantic stories about battles, cowboys, and thieves, but in recent decades are about the rise of the drug cartels. Some corrido singers followed suit. And while not every modern corrido includes criminal references, it's not a secret some of them are written for drug lords or to highlight their criminal activities. The song El Azul we talked about focuses on a powerful gangster, commonly believed to be the late Juan Jose Esparragosa Moreno, a.k.a. Azul, a former federal detective who later joined two of Mexico's most notorious drug traffickers, Ismael El Mayo Zambada y El Chapo Guzman, the Sinaloa cartel. I'm sure you remember the second name. The song Chi La Pizza, we talked about, is said to be referring to La Chapiza, the name for those working in Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo, who is still in the prison in the U.S. And a security analyst he talked to in this article says that Sometimes the singers speak in code. They even use slang words or names of dealers and characters they only know inside the organization. So who orders a song knows exactly what it means. But not all bands or singers are allowed to sing freely about a specific cartel. To be able to do these songs where you openly say names, cities where events took place, you need a permit. And it would need to be someone close to those characters because you told you the story. Where'd you get the idea? It's part of a code that exists within Mexican music that is not talked about much. You cannot sing of any character if you did not have authorization from a relative or someone close to them. He said a narcocorrido dedicated to a drug lord ends up being a trophy for the character's ego. And the gangster's ego fills by saying, I'm locked up here in jail, and my corrido is playing. Or if they already killed him, the family likes to say that the corrido is playing throughout Mexico. For them, it's their greatest achievements because in those corridos, they send messages against the government and against their enemies, and many times the artist is not aware of the problem he is getting into for doing it. And Peso Pluma spoke with Mexican media and says that people ask for corridos to be written. Quote, it's normal. Otherwise, we wouldn't have content. All the regional Mexican artists who sing these songs, there are people who call them, hey, how much do you charge me for one of those? And I'll tell you, I do it, and I give it to you. Now, they got more into the story, but like I said, this is all these different things that are brought up. And it's a lot more than just the music. It's a fascinating thing going on here. But Peso Pluma, as we see, is the front runner of the entire group. The whole thing. With a lot of artists coming in behind them. Because you got to talk about a major library of music. Listen, this is what's like everything else in music, okay? When a certain artist comes out, something comes to a crossover, and all of a sudden a song becomes very popular, guess what? Just like if an artist becomes, they call it a sellout, right? They always say the same thing. Well, but what happens here is you've just created something that's going to bring popularity into everything. Like, why not? Sometimes you need this kind of crossover at the risk of selling out because it then opens people up to a library of music. And in this case, we're going to have some young people now that are going to embrace regional Mexican music. It will be part of their lexicon. It'll be part of their playlists. And why not? It's different. It's individual. It's a unique thing that's not been very popular any other time. And regional Mexican now has gotten so modernized with these artists. Let's make that point too. The Calibre 50s or Nathaniel Cano, right? Or Christian Nodal. All these different artists that are out there that are all doing music and they've been around for years. And all of a sudden, now we get these songs that are popular. Like on the Latin charts, they've always had regional Mexican songs that have always been up there charting at the same time as the Caribbean-based, mostly, reggaeton artists. With the exceptions of Colombia and, Colombia and other places in South America. Don't get me wrong. But that's a different story altogether. It's really fascinating when you look at it. And I really enjoy that this has all come together. So there we go. Keep an eye on it. Embrace it a little bit. Listen, if you want to catch a little bit of the songs yourselves, feel free to go and listen to my Mega Miami playlist. It's over on Spotify. Look for King of Podcasts if you're looking for me to follow. Or you can find the playlist first at kingofpodcasts.com. And then from there, check it out for yourself, follow along, and catch the music. Along with some other music I put in there. There's a bit of reggaeton, quite a bit of dembo, dance, a little bit of pop, a little bit of rap. It's a mix of what music I think is still good that I'm enjoying right now. My own personal mix. Maybe you'll like it. Got some radio stuff to talk about coming up right now. And then I also have to talk about podcasting a little bit. I'm going to talk about Jerry Springer and a few other movie things that are coming up. The writer's strike. We're going to talk about that in a moment. We'll bring that up. Let's do the writer's strike first. Let's talk about that right now, because that is still, we kind of focused on last week on the program, so I want to do a little update on that. I think it's very important because we're getting close to the May 1st deadline, and we do not have a deal in place. So let's talk about this. So the latest news comes from Deadline, and what we've reported so far we go to right now, and studio offers already been made. The Writers Guild right now is reviewing it. The latest proposal from the AMPTP. And we're waiting to see where that comes from it. So the story right now is that there are picket signs being prepared to possibly hit the streets next week. But there's been some movement in the last 24 hours. There was a new proposal from the studios to the Writers Guild negotiating committee. And the Guild and the AMPTP actually met face-to-face late Thursday afternoon. So, as I record the episode tonight, they've already spoken. The counter-proposal was made. And meetings between the Guild and AMPTP have been going on since March 20th. And so far, no details of specifics or the counter have been put out. Two sides are scheduled to meet again tomorrow or Friday. And no comments have been made. The AMPTP, Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, they put a best and last offer, as one insider described them. But now we don't know what's happening. We don't know anything about the details of it. But into the weekend, there could be one or at least two more proposals from the AMPTP to the Writers Guild. This could just run to the last second, the last minute. But we're not going to get a deal all done. If the writer's strike does occur on May 2nd, it will lead just over a week before the next set of talks are supposed to begin. Because the Directors Guild of America are also supposed to negotiate with studios on May 10th in anticipation because their current contract is expiring June 30th. So, as we've gone through this before, we will get back to another issue of a domino effect where we could see a shutdown of production. So things have to happen to stop this from happening. That's what's going to happen here. Vanity Fair put out a story about this, saying that if there's a writer's strike that hits Hollywood, everybody would lose. And they go on to go and talk about it. And they say that a strike could have a lasting impact, not just on razor series and late night monologues. As we talked about before, the writer's strike in 2007 was 100 days, crucial in helping secure participation in digital sales of the shows. And that was a real concession being made. They say that everyone loses if writers strike again. A work stoppage would not just impact writers, but producers, directors, editors, gaffers, and everyone with a passing connection to the entertainment industry, all the way down to the wait staff in the restaurants. No one wants this to happen. It affects families, mortgages, tuition, and all the people that those are hiring. So we talk about this. That if it comes up, we just mentioned just a minute ago that it's not just the Writers Guild. If they hold back, the Directors Guild is also going to get caught up in this. And the AMPTP are going to be spread thin trying to negotiate with both. So one deal's got to get done so they get to the next deal. Studios don't want the strike to happen, and it could derail their production timelines. Now, because of the 2007 strike, it also helped for shows like Cops and The Celebrity Apprentice to become popular. International producers are going to benefit from this as well, because if America stops doing anything, then these streamers are going to have to go outside the country to find programs they can just subtitle. Not only is the Directors Guild going into talks, it's also the SAG-AFTRA, which is thus the artists. Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, they're also coming in. And that's the group that represents actors, broadcasters, personalities of radio, recording artists, and the performers. So, all of it. The Writers Guild, in the last run of strike, and the Hollywood Labor Union issues of 2019, it was the Writers Guild against the talent agents, but that kind of blown off. Now then the mix was what Writers Guild negotiating with the talent agents, then AMPTP, and the AMPTP with Directors Guild, and SAG-AFTRA. These are all going to have to come through. It's a big, big deal. Late night shows would have to shut down if there's a strike. All late night shows. So they might all have that. Saturday Night Live would also get shut down. It's all this that could happen. Audiences would also be impacted as well. And Hollywood would get another major setback for the entertainment industry and everyone who works in it that already was recovering from the pandemic. Like the emergency measures are already being dropped now. Only for this to happen to shut everything down again. So it's important that this all gets shut and nipped in the butt. Okay, got a few more stories I want to bring in real quick. We'll just quick hit these. Music discovery on radio stations now audio-visual. And radio is now hoping that the dashboards of all new cars are going to have this. And I'm actually shopping for a new car, so I'm going to have to probably see this myself at some point. Now, this is from last week. The many programmers at music stations are taking pride in breaking artists. And they're wondering if the same sort of moment happens when they hear their song on Spotify for the first time. No, not at all. Like, there's still something to be said about, at the NAB show for 2023, there was a session called How My Song Appears and Sounds on the Radio. And some of the people on stage, they said, oh, well, you know, I still believe in radio from a new music discovery standpoint, but we're still hugely influential from a new music discovery standpoint. If an artist wants to be a superstar, they have to have radio. No, they don't. And I think, well, you know, it's the DJs that have no idea what the songs are, or don't care. They're just there to, you know, get some cheap paycheck, and they're just being told to, like, promote social media or whatever, or, you know, promote the website, and not have much else to say. But they're really not doing too much with new music discovery because most of these stations are not putting out a lot of new music, as they say, and actually not doing it in real time. So there's that part people are trying to say. One of the other people on here in this session says that we're able to take what starts with a song broadcast on the radio, build a relationship and experience in the car that establishes a connection with the artists and songwriters. That was never really possible before. All right. Just because you can see the name and artist on there. So that story has come out. There was another one about hybrid radio and the digital dash. It's all these stations are all happy about the digital dashboard, and that's going to make the difference. And so they're going through, you know, colorful station imagery, all the things they're doing where they're going to be able to add ads in here. They're going to have a little more information about the artists and the music. It's all crap. Come on. Everybody thinks it's going on. The new technology is going to be extra special. But it doesn't take anything away from the audio content. It doesn't enhance or actually really improve the audio content itself. Meanwhile, radio is also hurting in the sense about sports radio, which you thought at one point was actually popular. But now we're getting sports radio in many cases that's talking a lot about, you know, doing betting and talking about gambling and odds and all that stuff. So ESPN and other national sports talk brands are losing a race against time. Awful Announcing wrote about this. And there's been a lot of things we've talked about this. Dan Le Batard, who had a show on ESPN Radio in the afternoon or late mornings that would lead to the rest of the lineup of ESPN Radio, has hurt. In 2018, ESPN Radio podcasts were approaching 40 million monthly downloads. Le Batard's show led the way. Now, ESPN Radio and national sports talk in general doesn't draw any sort of audience in major markets with its own personalities. And for that is that ESPN Radio has an inability to succeed in big cities happens before the stations hit the air. They require local affiliates to carry its national morning show, so they can tell advertisers they have a presence in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Boston, but there isn't a single Chicago sports fan on the planet that wants to talk to listen to Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max talk about the Bears. And so when there's local programming in the midday or afternoons, it's dead on arrival. So ESPN got hit with a lot of layoffs. And ESPN Radio looks to be on Disney's back burner. People are just not caring about it. CBS Sports Radio also getting roadblocks. NBC Sports Radio actually dropped their brand in 2018. Fox Sports Radio is still in the best shape. They have hosts like Colin Cowherd and Dan Patrick. but they're the exception. Outside of Chris Russo, the Mad Dog, who headlines his own Sirius XM station, Mad Dog Radio, almost every national sports talk with an audience hosts their own podcast and makes an insane amount of money. At the moment, the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Goss, number 1 sports podcast on Apple, number 28 podcast overall according to Chartable. DraftKings is paying Dan Le Batard $50 million to distribute his show through 2024. Yep. Bill Simmons, number 2 in sports. But podcasting's doing fine on the sports side, but the radio side, absolutely not. And that's the problem. Radio is programming badly in other markets. That's what they do. They don't know any better. It's just the way it is. Story came out about podcast listeners that are, half of them are regularly 35 to 44 years old. So take that in mind if you're doing your demographics. I want to take one of the stories that came out when I talked about theatrical releases and the money being put into those. We talked about Amazon putting $1 million into marketing for new releases into theaters. Apple also putting in $1 billion. Well, now Warner Brothers Discovery is going all in on theatrical releases, which means the same thing for Max, the newly renamed Max from HBO Max. So remember when Warner Brothers tried to do day and date for their movies in 2020? What a mistake. Well, David Zaslav now that runs Warner Brothers Discovery, he wants to go back to basics, business as usual. So in Las Vegas' CinemaCon, he's rejected the streaming-first strategy of his predecessor, Jason Kilar, who the Hulu co-founder did advanced day and date for HBO Max only releases for Warner Brothers movies. He wants to do, Zaslav, long theatrical runs for Warner's new slate of movies like Barbie and The Flash. Now, Max will depend on Warner Brothers' theatrical slate for a steady supply of A-level first-run movies. And the idea is that the wheel doesn't need to be reinvented. And this was an arrangement that HBO worked with no objection from exhibitors, and it works for home viewers. Movies deemed good enough to make it to theaters perform better on streaming. Lifted by the slick saturation marketing campaigns that Warner, like other studios, is used to delivering. Right. Quality movies need to be in theaters and then go to streaming, as it's always been. Just because the platform has changed to not linear doesn't make a difference. And they're right to that. Four movies that were originally going to be streaming for HBO Max: House Party, Magic Mike's Last Dance, Evil Dead Rise, and and Blue Beetle, the DC movie. They were intended for HBO Max. They've now been upgraded to theaters. So that's a smart idea. Very smart. I like that. And I'm happy to see that. Now I want to take one more story before we wrap things up. And just pay tribute. Listen, I know people didn't probably think much of this. The worst talk show in the history of television. You could say that, and Jerry Springer would take it with pride. He passed away today, age 79. Did this talk show, I think it was 1996 till about, 2019, I think it was, or 2019. Former mayor of Cincinnati. He died in his home in Chicago, apparently of pancreatic cancer. And it had been fighting cancer for the past few months. Recently, it had gotten worse. Ran for nearly 5,000 episodes. Jerry Springer, mega popular and controversial. After launching with a focus on politics, it got retooled and became a rating smash and cultural phenomenon as a tabloid-style program, focusing on hot-button topics, salacious stories. Springer would be the fatherly figure overseeing the proceedings despite the chaos, signing off every episode with a final thought. He did it on every show, even the most ridiculous shows he did. He would still do a final thought, like a minute of thought, and he would have a phrase, which Lester Holt and NBC Nightly News copies and cheats from and steals from every night. Every night. Take care of yourselves and each other. That was what Jerry Springer said after every show. So how dare Lester Holt take it without giving credit to Jerry Springer? Just saying. A Jerry Springer producer, NBC Universal, paid tribute and said, quote, Jerry Springer was much more than a talk show host through the redefined television. He was a savvy politician, pop cultural icon, devout and loyal friend who was most proud when he spoke up for the marginalized and underrepresented. Connected equally with both the powerful and the man on the street, strangers were open to him and loved nothing more than give him a voice. The show was produced by NBC Universal Syndication Studios and ran for 27 seasons. It continues to air in syndication. Yep. Incredible. Now, the last on-screen appearance for Jerry Springer was on The Masked Singer, where he performed in a large Beatle costume. But Jerry Springer on our television for a long time, incredible. And, yeah, over 40 years on camera, 10 years in politics, had quite a career. But he says a lot. It's a very testament to somebody that really disrupted the space of television. His show did. Among all those shows that we had, from Montel Williams to Jenny Jones to Sally Jesse Raphael to Charles Perez to Richard Bay. Trust me, I know. I watched all of them. Maury Povich. I watched them all. Jerry Springer was the trendsetter. He was the leader while others followed. Because that show, man, 96, 97, 98, what a wild show. I worked at Channel 25 when Channel 5 at the time, actually WBTV in West Palm Beach, was running Oprah at 4 o'clock. And let's just say this, when I was working there early on in 1998, when I first got out of college and I started working at the station, 25 years ago almost. Well, let's just say this. To get the 5 o'clock news up off the ground, because the ratings, regularly, WPBF, Channel 25's ratings were third place in news at that time. So they put Jerry Springer, they took the risk of putting Jerry Springer out of the morning slot at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right before the news. It worked. Because for a while, Jerry Springer beat Oprah in the ratings. It beat it. And then when the show kind of got a little bit off the wall, it was like they kind of toned it down. Then the ratings went down a bit. And then they moved it over to another station within the realm, Channel 34 WTVX. And basically, Jerry Springer would continue on. Like at one point, the one mistake they made was they stopped showing the fighting because the violence was too much. And there was a curbing to it. And then all of a sudden, the show gets back to NBC Universal, and it was Studios USA that ran it, and NBC Universal took the show back, and was like, no, we want the fights again. And they took the fights, and it wasn't so much real anymore, it was much more contrived. Like you just hear a boxing bell, and they just go at it, the guests. But hey, people enjoyed it, and the show was fun, even to the end. All right, well, this is the program tonight. Thanks for listening in, finding the show as you always do. Really appreciate y'all checking out the program and listening in. And as always, I hope you'll consider to come back for another Broadcasters Podcast. And by the way, do remember that you can catch the show every week here, broadcasterspodcast.com. You can find the program wherever you find podcasts. That's Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and all major podcast platforms. Of course, I'm on social media at King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and TikTok. And until next week, remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.